Wonderful news, friends. A Holocaust denier has made a response video to one of my answers. And this is exactly what I was looking for. I was hoping to get one of them to respond in a bit more detail. And this is precisely what I wanted. Because now, in a video format for the world to see, I can show you how easily these arguments these people have fall apart. So this guy's name is Jim. He made a video responding to an answer or a piece I wrote about a Holocaust denier on Quora named Lester. Now, the article here that I wrote is not super great. I had already written pretty in-depth articles, posting more sources and evidence. This was just kind of applying those pieces to the similar arguments made by every Holocaust denier. So it's funny how, of course, he picks the one that's the shortest and the simplest to respond to, and the more in-depth ones with the evidence he just ignores. And that's precisely because when you post sources and when these people have to come up against primary source evidence, their whole argument just falls apart. So let's show this here. This is going to be pretty fun, and off we go.
In all the camps, there were about 50 ovens. They all weren't working all at once, okay? But I'm going to give them to them. I'm going to give them 50 ovens that they were all working at once. How's that? All right, we'll give it to them. You can only cremate 1,000 bodies a day, right? I mean, that's all you can cremate in an oven. 20. You can only in a day, one oven can only cremate 20 bodies. If you have 50 times 20 is only 1,000. So you're talking around 1,000 bodies a day. He's saying, well, they're talking about 4,000 to 5,000 bodies a day.
So Jim starts us off with the pretty typical, you couldn't burn the amount of bodies you needed to burn to make the numbers check out argument. This is a long debunked one, and I'll show you how we've debunked it. So he claims that they could only burn 1,000 bodies per day. He does admit that there are 50 ovens. Most Holocaust deniers like to say that there are only like 4 ovens, when in reality there was multiple complexes, each with many ovens. Now, I said there was 4 complexes. I'm wrong. There was actually 5 complexes and 50 ovens. He's about right there. But he says each oven could only burn 20 bodies a day, and I'm not sure where he gets that information. I couldn't find any information to say that that's correct. So let's keep going there. I think he just made that number up. So how do we know? I say 4,000 to 5,000 bodies could be burned per day. And where did I get that number? Well, a letter was sent by Karl Bischoff. He was the head of the Central Building Administration at Auschwitz-Birkenau. He sent this letter to Hans Kammler, an SS official in Berlin. And in this letter, he summarized exactly how many bodies could be burned in a 24-hour period. And you'll see this letter on the screen now here. Now, in the 5 cremation complexes, in the first one, you could burn about 300 to 400. And the second and third, you could burn over 1,000, around 1,500. And in the fourth and fifth, you could burn about 800 bodies a day. So in total, he claimed you could burn 4,756 bodies per day in the cremation complexes at Auschwitz. Now, this is not coming from historians. This is coming from SS officials and the head of central administration at Auschwitz-Birkenau to the SS. This is not a forged document. This is a legitimate document. We have the document in hand. So we're not making up this 4,000 to 5,000 number. I didn't invent this. I got this number from primary source documents.
First of all, where the hell did you come up with the 11 million? Okay? See, there's a number there that's not even accurate. All right? How many people died during this time period we call the Holocaust? Well, in Auschwitz, they only claimed 70,000 people died. And in all the camps, they claim around 300,000 people died.
All right, so next Jim claims that we made up the 11 million figure, which is pretty silly. I'm not going to focus on the 11 million. I'm just going to focus on the 6 million Jews. 11 million people died, but the crux of the denier argument is that there was not an attempt to exterminate the Jewish population and not 6 million Jews died. So I want to focus in just on that for a sec. So how do we know 6 million Jews died? Where do we get this? Again, we didn't make it up. We have a lot of sources for this. So let's start with the first one. So the Korher report was sent to the head of the SS Statistics Bureau in 1943. And in this, he says that 1.2 million Jews had been guided through the camps in the general government. Now, they previously used the term special treatment. Himmler didn't like this, though, so they stuck to this other term. Now, this is just code for kill. The Nazis knew what they were doing, and in Special Action 1005, which was an order issued by Nazi High Command, they ordered everyone to kind of cover this up. So they like to use a lot of this coded language. Now, this isn't the only report, though. At the same time, the British intercepted a telegram in 1943 called the Hult telegram, which claims 1.2 million Jews had been killed in Operation Reinhard, which is the extermination camps like Treblinka. So we have two documents, both in 1943, both confirming 1.2 million Jews had died. Now, this does not include the totals from the Einsatzgruppen, right, which are the Einsatzgruppen, which were the mobile killing squads. Now, we have documents from them, too. In 1941, they had reported to Himmler that they had killed at least 500,000 Jews in the Soviet Union. Then by 1943, they'd claimed to kill about 1.5 million Jews. So already in 1943, we know from documents sent by Nazis to Nazis that 3 million Jews had been killed. And this does not include the Jews killed at Auschwitz, which we'll get to in a sec. This does not include the killings in the gas vans in 1939 in Poland. This only includes 3 to 4, or I think 4 or 5 maybe, extermination camps and the mobile killing squads, the Einsatzgruppen, right? So we're not even dealing with the full picture, and we're not even done with the Holocaust. The Holocaust didn't end in 1943. It ended in 1945. So we still have to factor in Auschwitz. We still have to factor in the massacres early in Poland. We still have to factor in 2 more years of extermination camp use plus Auschwitz. That's where we get to the number of 6 million. And it's a very reasonable number. And we have dozens and dozens of scholarly articles and investigations and research projects done from all over the world that confirm this number. Now, is it 6 million? I'm not super convinced. I think 5.5 would be a more realistic number. But and part of the reason, let's say, why can't anyone agree on if it's 5 million or 6 million? Well, the reason for that is because it's tough to get super reliable census data. We have a general idea of how many Jews and people there were in Europe prior to World War II, but not an exact idea. And so we know the number after, though. So the difficulty is, you take the number before, then the number after, find the difference, and there's part of how you come to this conclusion. But since we don't have an exact number before, since that number can vary by about 500,000 people, we have about 500,000 variation within the statistics we can come to over how many died in the Holocaust. It doesn't mean the number's unreliable. It just means since we don't have that reliable pre-war census data, we can't get an exact figure. But regardless, we're pretty close. The number may be off a couple 100,000, but it's not off. Holocaust deniers claim like 100,000 Jews died. We're nowhere near that off. For only 100,000 Jews to die, we have to have the SS lying, Korps lying, Hult lying. We have to have Himmler lying. We have to have all the Nazi field units lying. And I don't see how that's even possible. Now we get to the death books and the Red Cross papers. So these are 2 documents the Holocaust deniers claim disprove the Holocaust. Now, neither of these documents disprove the Holocaust at all. The only reason they claim these documents do is because they don't understand the documents, and that's because these people are not historians or experts or really even that smart. So the first document is the death books. These were released by the Soviet Union in the 1970s, if memory serves, and they are a record of the Jews killed at Auschwitz. Now, they record about 66,000, if memory serves, total killed. And Holocaust deniers say, hey, here, look, this is proof only 66,000 died at Auschwitz. The problem is the document only records prisoners who were brought into the camp. So let me take you through how Auschwitz went. A train full of people arrives. Then they are sorted. 99% are put into one group and 1% are put into the other. The 1% get to go in the camp and be slave labor. Now, it was horrible. They were killed for multiple reasons. They were starved. Life in the camp was not fun. But there was stuff like Jewish currency. There was a little store you could buy stuff from. They were meant to be kept alive, at least for a little while, just so that they could work and be slaves for the Third Reich. Now, when you got into the camp and you were official prisoner and you died, your number went on this list. And again, they were trying to keep these people in the camp alive, at least for a little while, so they could provide that slave labor. So we don't see a ton dying in the camp. We see about 66,000. Now, the 99% that were shoved off into the gas chambers, these people were not recorded in the death books. The Nazis didn't stop and take everyone's name and write them down and total up how many they were killing. They just shoved them into the gas chamber, and then they burned the bodies. So when you look at the total that died at Auschwitz, about 1 million, right? 900,000, it depends on where you want to get your sources. Almost all of these people died in the gas chambers, not in the camp. They were never prisoners of the camp and forced to work. They were just killed the second they arrived at Auschwitz. Now let's go even further here with the Red Cross document. So there's a Red Cross document saying that 300,000 Jews had died in the Holocaust. And where did they get this number? Well, when the Germans sent Jews to concentration camps, they would send death certificates to the Red Cross. They didn't send the death certificates for every Jew they killed, just the ones who became prisoners at labor camps. So any Jew killed in the gas chambers did not have a death certificate sent. Any Jew that was killed by the mobile killing squads did not have a death certificate sent. So this is an incomplete document. This is just the Red Cross saying, hey, the Germans sent us these death certificates for Jews. That's all the document is. It's not the Red Cross saying this is how many people died in the Holocaust. And why would the Germans send every single death certificate of every single person they killed? That just leaves a clear record of what they're doing. And we know from Special Action 1005, issued by Nazi High Command, they were trying to cover this up. So this again brings us back to misunderstanding documents. Neither of these documents prove a damn thing. The Nazis or the Holocaust deniers just don't understand how to read documents, right? They find these things and they twist them to whatever meaning they need them to fit because they're anti-Semitic and they hate Jews. So they will find any reason or any little way to say that the whole thing was false, and they just misinterpret, misunderstand, fabricate, whatever it takes. So that is where they get the 300,000 number, and yeah, that's how you debunk that. On to the next.
No. They bombed the roads, the train lines. They might have had some horses here and there, but I don't think they had enough of them to make it functional, do you? Of course, there's your answer. Oh, they repaired them all. Well, I didn't see anything repaired. At the end of the war, everything was just completely devastated. Just completely bombed out. Nothing was left.
Okay, so now we're getting into the logistics thing. And this usually goes that the Nazis couldn't have supplied the camps with the food and the people because train lines were bombed and blah, 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 blah. Well, the Nazis managed to supply 3 fronts of war and, give or take 5 to 10 million soldiers, tanks, trucks, planes, ships, using the train lines. So since they could supply their entire military forces, I don't see exactly how they couldn't supply these camps with the necessary provisions or transport people there. Then he says that, I say that the Nazis repaired the train lines when they were bombed, and he's like, I don't see how it was destroyed at the end of the war. Yeah, it was. By 1945, Germany had fallen, and the Allies had been able to cut all the train lines. But in 1941, 1942, 1943, and 1944, and part of 1945, the Nazis still had control of Germany and Poland, and they would repair train lines when they were bombed. Now, at the very, very end of the war, in the final months when the Nazis couldn't retake the territory they'd lost and they didn't have the resources to repair train lines, yeah, sure, at this point they stopped repairing them. But this, again, did not happen until the very end of the war and also the very end of the Holocaust when 11 million people had already been killed. So, again, this is another argument I don't get because the Holocaust took place from 1939 to 1945, and the only point in time in which the German train lines had completely broken down was the very, very end of the war. I don't know if they don't understand World War II or if, again, they're intentionally misinterpreting evidence, but likely it's the latter.
Hundreds of camps, countless mass graves. Okay, we admit there were hundreds of camps. Where's the countless mass graves? And where are the countless bodies in these mass graves? None of this has been proven.
Okay, so here he challenges the mass graves. Where are the mass graves? You can't prove there's mass graves. Yes, I can prove there are mass graves. Here's a picture of all of the discovered mass graves in Lithuania. And then here is a chart showing all the mass graves in Ukraine. Now, the same information exists for Poland, Germany, all over the place because these exist. Now, these are not mass graves that we think are there. These are mass graves we have excavated, discovered, and recorded. So we've dug up bodies. We know they were shot. How do we know the Nazis did it? Well, like I said, the Einsatzgruppen sent in records that they were doing this. They sent this to Himmler. They sent this to Nazi high command. They were bragging, or at least reporting, how many people they had killed. In addition, Nazis have confessed this. The Nazis that were involved in these mass shootings confessed that they did this. So we have the perpetrators confessing, we have the actual mass graves, we have civilians that witnessed it too. We have plenty of evidence. I don't know where he gets that we don't have any evidence of this. We have tons and tons of evidence, but he's not going to look at the evidence. He's just going to say, you guys don't know anything, or he'll say they're all forgeries, or he'll say the Jews are behind it, or something stupid like that, because that's the only way they can weasel out of these arguments that they make that are so stupid.
No, that's the original wooden door. That's the original wooden door. But
all right, let's talk about the wooden doors. So the wooden door I was referring to was at Auschwitz. The original gas chamber was converted to a bomb shelter in 1944. When they did this, they replaced the original door with a easier to swing wooden door. Now, first off, a wooden door works. They did use wooden doors occasionally in gas chambers. It doesn't ruin anything. They don't need to be airtight. The delousing chambers, which Holocaust deniers admit existed, also used wooden doors. So you really don't need like an airtight door. They also say that if there's a wooden door, that people could push their way out, but that's not how it works. Not all 1,000 people were going to push towards that single door. It would have, crushed different individuals trying to get out. So it doesn't really work that way. And I mean, these wooden doors were used for bomb shelters, so clearly they were able to withstand a fair degree of pressure. These were not like cheap little crappy doors. These were pretty thick wooden doors. But we do have, in the case of Auschwitz, the original door. Here's a photo of it here. And it's actually on display at Auschwitz. So we know. In addition, we have blueprints and we have SS guards saying that it was converted to a bomb shelter. We know exactly when it was converted to a bomb shelter. So we have pretty strong evidence, I would say conclusive evidence, that the original door is not this wooden door. But Holocaust deniers are never going to, bring this up. They're going to cover their ears and shout because they cannot contend with the facts, as I have stated.
No. I have not heard anyone saying that the gas chambers were clean after every use.
Yeah, I bet he never heard it because he never read the actual documents. Joseph Sakar, a SS guard at the camp, confessed, and not so much confessed, gave testimony explaining what happened. And he said, after every killing, we washed everything and sprayed it with a substance so that the odor of the gas would not remain. We also washed the floor of the chamber. Now, they did this because when people die in a room, they make a mess. It's a very ugly thing. And they wanted to put more people in the room. So after every time they'd kill everybody, they'd go in, usually wearing gas masks, but about an hour later after the gas had dissipated, they'd take out the bodies, move them to the crematoria, and they would put more bodies in that day or not. Sometimes they use the chambers once a day, sometimes they use them multiple times a day. Depends on the time frame we're talking about.
I don't buy that at all. I think the Russians destroyed them. And yes, they probably did rebuild them.
Yes, they did. Himmler ordered that the gas chambers be destroyed. He did so as the Russians were closing in on the camp. We know this for a fact. We know that the camps were destroyed on January 26th, or not the camps, the gas chambers were destroyed on January 26, 1945, the day before liberation. We know that the chambers were there because we have tens of thousands of camp prisoners who said they were there. Not one single camp prisoner said they weren't there. We have SS camp guards saying that they were there and telling us what they were used for. We have Rudolf Hess, the SS camp commander, saying that they were there and what they were used for. So I don't get where he thinks that the Russians blew them up. They were, when the Russians arrived, they were already blown up. We know this for a fact.
And diluted them on purpose, so the results were inaccurate. No. Lukta took the samples. He gave them to the place where he had to give the samples to, okay? And they're the ones that had to do the investigation on the samples. Lukta had nothing to do with diluting any samples.
That's correct. He did actually, Fred sent the samples off to a lab to be tested. He failed to tell the lab where the samples came from. He told them they had come from a demolition site, or it was like a natural gas disaster or something like that. So since they had no idea what the samples were, they just knew they had stone they were testing. They ground up the stone, took a composite sample, and tested it. Now, if they had been told that these were pieces of the wall from Auschwitz, they would have tested the front layer. Jonathan Ross, the head of the institute, testified in court that he was not told where the samples were from, and that cyanide gas, which they were testing for, only penetrates about 10 micrometers into stone. So he would have only tested the surface had he known, but he was not told. The lab was livid over this, by the way, and this guy's confessing it, so this kind of proves my point, that Fred's results are bullshit. They're not real. They don't exist. They don't function. They're completely unfounded. The samples were diluted and ruined. The samples were collected really terribly to begin with, and subsequent tests done by actual experts knowing what they're doing has proven not only that there was cyanide in the gas chamber rubble, but that there's also cyanide in the crematoria, that there was cyanide in Block 11, and that there was no cyanide in any of the barracks or anything like that. So, again, this just proves that there were gas chambers.
And, of course, the Krakow Museum and the first testing of the buildings, they actually agreed with Lucha.
This right here is just a stupid, bold-faced lie. So after Lucha did his report, 2 years later in 1990, another report was done. And this was done by the Institute of Forensic Research in Krakow. Now, for some reason, deniers always say that this report supports them, and I don't know why, because it most absolutely does not in any way, shape, or form support their conclusions. The report actually goes very out of its way to say that they are indeed wrong, and that the entire Lucha report is baseless. So this report, the second one done in 1990, was actually done correctly. It was done by real experts who actually, knew what they were doing. So they made sure that the rubble they collected was from actually the gas chambers. And they tested rubble from a bunch of different places to come to a conclusion. And in their abstract, they say, these results, the Lucha report, allegedly proved that the materials under examination had not been in contact with cyanide, unlike the wall fragments from the delousing buildings, which revisionists discovered to have a considerable amount of cyanide compounds. Systemic research involving the most sensitive analytical methods undertaken by the Institute confirmed the presence of cyanide compounds in all kinds of gas chamber ruins, even the basement of Block 11 in Auschwitz, where first experimental gassings of victims of Zyklon B had been carried out. The analysis controls samples taken from other places, especially from living quarters, yield unequivocally negative results. For the sake of interpretation, several laboratory experiments have been carried out. So they're saying there that we found cyanide compounds in all the gas chamber rubble, in the basement, in the crematoria, but we did not find it anywhere else, right? There was control samples. Here are the results of that experiment, right? You can see exactly how much cyanide they found. So no, the 1990 report actually completely and 100,000% disproves the Lucha report.
Well, who are the experts that have debunked it? What expert do you know that has debunked the Lucha report? The only experts I know that have actually, gone in favor of it were three men, Germar Rudolph, Walter Luftel. They actually supported the report.
Yeah, the two men he's referencing here are both well-known Holocaust deniers. Germar Rudolph got busted for showing his dick in public to a bunch of people. He was exercising with his pants off publicly. Something stupid like that. He's crazy and he's a Holocaust denier. So is the other guy. So the only two people he knows that supported the document are, of course, Holocaust deniers, right? And that's kind of funny how that works out. No historians supported it. And in fact, when this was presented in court for Ernst Zundel's defense, the court rejected it, saying he didn't have the qualifications to act as an expert. Also, the lab that had tested the sample said that the whole experiment was bunk. And then, of course, we have the 1990 experiment, which proves it was completely invalid. So there was a lot of chemists that actually looked into this, and they all said it was completely BS. There's no chemist on Earth who has said that the report is valid. There's Holocaust deniers who have said the report is valid, but of course they would, because they're Holocaust deniers, and this report conforms to their very stupid view of the world.
That's not true at all. Cyanide gas, when it's used for fumigation, it stays a long time in a building, in a room.
He's wrong here. The gas did go away after about 30 minutes. In the technical manual for the very gas pellets used for the Holocaust, the manual reads, "The development of the gas from the zyklon sets in with great vehemence immediately following the pouring of it out. The thinner the layer of the disseminated support material, the faster will be the development of the gas. Depending on the species of the pests to be controlled, on the characteristic of the room to be gassed, one may choose the gas concentration to arise very quickly or more slowly by the thickness of the disseminated layer. Usually the material will be disseminated in a layer of 1/2 to 1 centimeter thickness. Then the greatest part of the hydrogen cyanide will have developed already after an hour or hour and a half at normal room temperature." So what they're saying there, and this is the manual for the Zyklon B used in the Holocaust, is it's saying it depends on how thick you pour it in, but it should go away within about a half an hour to an hour. And this, again, is not made up. This is from the manual to the Zyklon B.
Are you out of your mind? The problem is people killed in gas chambers by mobile killing squads. There were nobody killed in mobile killing squads except people that were killed by the Einsatzgruppen who deserved to be shot.
I don't want to get this video taken down. The traitors he's referring to were Slavs, Russians, Poles, whole bunch of people. They weren't traitors. They were members of free nations conquered by the Germans. Some may have revolted, as they have the right to do, against occupiers. Almost all, were killed just because Hitler said they were subhuman. And that's who he's referring to, and that's who he's saying deserved it. And I want to leave you guys with this for now, because this just shows who these people are. These are not scholars or academics or liberated intellectuals. This guy didn't make one argument I couldn't just throw in the trash immediately. And every time he's been presented with evidence, he just covers his ear and shouts. And that's because these are not intelligent people. These are not academics. These are not experts on anything. They have found a very small subset of stuff that they've misinterpreted or fabricated or just invented or assigned meaning to that confirms to their worldview, which is inherently racist, anti-Semitic, and bigoted. That is what they focus on. And for that very reason, they will never have my respect, not only as people, but as intellectuals. They're not intellectuals. They're not after the truth. They don't look at the full picture and where the evidence takes them and go there. They just focus in on the little itty-bitty stuff. And it's the only way that they can find a reason to say that the Holocaust didn't happen. And it's pure hatred, and it's vile. And the more I'm around it, it makes me sick to my stomach. And it just fuels me with anger and disgust and hatred. So for now, I wanted to get this response out quick. This is part 1. I'm going to do a part 2. There's 15 minutes of this guy's video left, and I'm sure he's going to drop more nuggets of wisdom. So I will have part 2 out in a day or so. I thank you all for watching, and I hope you're all doing well. Thanks, bye.